Hey guys, welcome to training. Today we're going to talk about the buyer-broker service agreement. Grab one and follow along. It'll be a lot easier for you to understand. It's a 2-page document. Down at the bottom, it's got the date of 11/2014 from the Real Estate Commission. So you know that's the correct document for you to use, okay? The buyer-broker service agreement in paragraph 1 says, broker's services may include but not be limited to consulting with buyer regarding particular properties and the availability of financing, formulating acquisition and purchase agreements, and receiving delivery of any offers made by buyer and accepted by seller. This establishes your relationship with the buyer, okay? That's, in my opinion, the number one reason this document exists. The next thing that's important, it talks about the duration of the agreement. So many of us, whenever we're working with the buyer, maybe we'll make an offer on a property and it doesn't get accepted or the deal falls through and we go look at another property. I get a 6-month buyer-broker agreement, just like I would get a 6-month listing agreement working for the seller. I'm going to get a 6-month commitment from the buyer that we're going to work together until he gets a house. And so that locks me in. That provides payment for me when that particular buyer purchases a home. Talks about how I'm going to get compensated. 9 times out of 10, it's through what's listed on the cooperating brokerage page, the MLS. So it establishes how I'm going to get paid as a buyer's broker. Many times, though, the buyer's agent doesn't explain all of this to the buyer. This document is just thrown in with all the other documents that go in with an offer. And you just say, sign here, sign here, sign here. So there are times when a buyer either doesn't understand what he signed with you or me, and so he doesn't understand. He may go to an open house with another agent being on the open house and walk in and say, hey, I want to buy this house, and sign a contract with him or her because he didn't understand what this is for. So you need to, as a buyer's agent, explain this to your buyer. Don't just roll it through. Be bold and say, look, I am going to represent you in the purchase of your next home. And this defines my relationship with you, buyer. It's your fiduciary duty, okay? It can be a tool to say, don't go work with any other agent. You're in an agreement with me. It's the counterpart to a listing agreement, right? Your seller can't go list his house with somebody else while he's in a listing agreement with you. So that's the purpose of that. But you've got to explain it to your buyer because many of them don't understand. Some of them don't care, but most of them just don't understand. So that's very important that you know why this document was created. Part 2 of that is the Oklahoma Real Estate Commission. They at any time they can call me and say, hey, we're going to come audit your files. That buyer's broker agreement is going to be looked at in the file audit section. And this document is on the Real Estate Commission too. You can go look at it if you want to. It says file audit. So something that can be audited if the OREC comes to my office. The very second thing on there, brokerage agreement, okay? That's what this is, okay? The Real Estate Commission is in place to protect the public, right? The OREC wants to make sure that we as agents are transparent with our clients, with our buyers and our sellers. And so we have documents in place that we have to execute, okay? And if our files get audited and we pull one of your files and you were the buyer's agent, I gotta know what you told them your job was. Okay? It's very important. It's more than what you will find in the contract, the sale of contract. Okay? So there's that. So if you've got the buyer, only the buyer, I want you to use the buyer-broker agreement, okay? Now, obviously, if you have the seller, you're going to use the listing agreement, okay? So that brings up the disclosure to seller or buyer of brokerage duties, responsibilities, and services, okay? All of this is in the Oakmar listing agreement that our offices use, the one that is produced by Oklahoma City Metropolitan Association of Realtors in dotloop. So that's what you're using if you're using what's in dotloop. All of this is in the listing agreement. Thank you to one of the agents who lobbied for me to understand that. So if you're using the Oakmar listing agreement, you don't have to use this. You can if you like another layer of protection, if you like the fact that it gives you another opportunity to talk to your seller about your duties, okay? I think that's great. So it's still going to be in the loop. It's still going to be on every one of our templates, but it is not required, okay? Now, what happens if you've got this listing and you get the buyer? There is some verbiage in the contract, but if you have the listing and you get the buyer, then you fill this out for the buyer, okay? Disclosure to seller or buyer. You have to let both parties know what your duties are. And then, of course, there's the acknowledgement and confirmation of disclosures that indicate it's an in-house transaction. Okay, that's something else. Brokerage duties, brokerage agreement, as is listed on the OREC file audit. Brokerage agreement. If you were to ask either one of your clients, what is your agreement with Metro First Realty Unlimited? They need to be able to at least know the document. So those are the things that I want you to give some thought to. So under those circumstances, they're required. So if you have the buyer only, do the buyer-broker agreement. If you have the listing, obviously you're going to have the listing agreement and all that stuff in there. But if you find your own buyer, then you're going to do this also, okay? All of this, I've spent lots of time on dotloop getting it all straightened out. It's probably over-organized now. I've redone the file checklist. The file checklist in dotloop is on every single listing template and every single sales template. First thing. It's not required for you to check those boxes or print this off and fill it out and send it in to us. That's not the point. The point of this is to help you be the best agent you can, to give the best service you can, and to protect our agency, okay? So all of these things, and it's very clear. When it gets down in here, we talk about the buyer-broker service agreement if we have the buyer only, all right? So you don't have that in the top part because that's your listing information. So if you go sell someone else's listing, you're going to have the pending part, and that's where you're going to put the buyer-broker service agreement, right? And if you have the listing and you get the buyer, then you're going to come down here and do the the disclosure to the seller or the buyer of the brokerage duties, okay? Remember all this. Watch it, rewind, watch. But what I'm saying, what I've done in dotloop to organize all those documents is the same, is a mirror of this, okay? So back to some of the things on here, and I know you guys know that you have to have your net to seller if you've got the listing. Whenever you have that listing presentation, you say, hey, I'm going to list your house for $200,000. You have a net to seller with the sales price of $200,000 in that example. When you get your first offer at $185,000, you make another net to seller at $185,000. If they say, I'm not taking $185,000, I want $197,315, then you're going to make another net to seller at whatever number I just said. So every time the dollars change, you have to provide to your seller a new picture of what he's going to walk away with, okay? So the other side of that is if you have the buyer, you're going to do the same thing. If you make your very first offer on this house at $185,000, you're going to Send him, include however you do it in person or use the app or whatever. You're going to use the 185. And then if it creeps up to 190, 195, $615, every time the dollars change, you need to have another one of those net to seller or buyer expense sheet, however that's looking. And so that's on here. Now, I did notice that on the file checklist, in the pending part, it says estimated cost to buyer. If you don't have the buyer, you're not going to do that, okay? I didn't put, I hand wrote it right there, if you have the buyer. Okay, obviously, if it's your listing and Century 21 brings the buyer, you're not going to have a net to buyer. Expenses to buyer. All right? So just keep that in mind. Every time the price changes, you need to do another one of those sheets. Okay? And I want everything. We want the home inspection. We want the termite. Not all the time. Conventional loans aren't always going to require termite certificates, require that. So if it's required or if it's applicable to the deal and it's on here, it's required. Okay. So if you don't have a termite inspection, even though in the dot loop it says required, you can just make a note to Nancy. Nancy is our compliance lady, and she knows dot loop upside down and backwards, in and out. So I know she's the one that sends you the notes that says, hey, you didn't get your signature on this or whatever. She's not perfect. She's never claimed to be perfect. So she's going to make a few mistakes, and she's going to ask you for something that maybe you don't need or you've already turned in. She just didn't see it. Okay, so she's going to understand that you're going to forget things, and you're going to understand that Nancy misses some things, myself included. I may follow up with what Nancy says and says, where's that document? And you say, here it is. It's in there. We just missed it. So all of this goes together to keep you compliant, our agency compliant, and keep us from being vulnerable. We have errors and omissions insurance, but nobody wants to make that claim, all right? And so as you go through here and as you look on dotloop, I've put some other things in there. For instance, if you have the listing, I've added a placeholder for you to put your CMA or whatever supporting evidence you have to arrive at the price that you're listing your house, that house for. Every once in a while, you'll get 3 or 4 months into it, and you can't prove that you told your seller, hey, we should start here, but then they insisted you start here. And 3 months later, they're upset, and you can't prove what you showed them, right? You can't prove those comps. You can recreate it to some degree, but you're going to have a hard time getting them to lower that price if you can't show them your information. Okay, so I've added things like that. So go in and look at each one of those templates and see what I've added. Closing documents, I need you to upload your closing documents. You're going to get a file from the closing company. Sometimes they'll email it to you, or there was a period of time they put it on a flash drive, but you're going to get the file. You're going to upload it to dotloop. Okay, at the very bottom, the very last thing, and I've got everything organized. I might have missed something or transposed something, but my goal is everything is in the same order in every single template. Okay, so at the very bottom it says closing documents. Above that, we've got this new thing called client survey. All right. The only way we as an agency, you as an agent, me as an agent, the only way we're going to get better is to survey our clients, okay? I've got a thorough but not exhaustive survey that we're going to send to your client. If you want to lead with it and email it and whatever, but it's in the loop, and at some point either I'll email it and say, hey, I'm the broker and I want to make sure my gal's doing well, my guy's doing well, tell me what you think. But it's going to be required. So get that in your mind. And if you're comfortable with telling your client, that'd be just fine. But when you go through there, you'll see client survey. So open it up and see what we're going to be asking your clients, because we want to get better. Not everybody is perfect. We're going to have some fumbles. And I'm not looking to roast you, but we're all looking to learn. There's always an opportunity to learn, okay? So as you go through all of that information, keep an open mind and ask me if you have any questions. Just text me or you can respond, via email or something like that. But I want you guys to get better. So that was a lot to digest. So if you have any questions, holler. Bye.